What's up everybody, I am Mongoose, you are awesome, and this is a Mid-Lane Fey building guide. For today's building guide, we'll do a quick introduction to Mid-Lane Fey, cover how to play in the early game, mid game, and late game, then we'll go over two builds, one for when you have plenty of cards, the other for when you're just starting out with a very limited card pool. First of all, I prefer the Fey for the off lane over the mid lane, but it is often necessary for your team's composition to have a tankier frontline initiator or split pusher in the off lane. That's perfectly okay, as the Fey can also be extremely effective in the mid lane. Some of the pros for the mid lane with Fey are she has very strong wave clear, she has a good mana efficient poke ability, and she has excellent gank potential with her ultimate. The cons, however, she has a lack of hard CC, the slow's often not enough to prevent someone from killing you. And she has no movement ability, so you're very susceptible to tower dives. Let's go over the Fey's abilities. The Fey's abilities include Bramble Patch, which causes a line of thorns to sprout from the ground, dealing ability damage and slowing enemies who come into contact with the brambles. Harvest Nettles, or Titty Sprinkles as I like to call it, it's a long-range projectile that deals ability damage, refunds mana cost on enemy. That's very, very important. Refunds mana cost on enemy hero hit, not minions, heroes. And consecutive hits on the same target within 9 seconds deal an additional 15% damage per hit. That stacks up to a maximum of 60% bonus damage. Untamed Growth causes a ticking AoE that results in a final explosion of damage. Her ultimate ability is Fly Trap, which is an AoE ability that, whenever it hits after a short delay, enemies caught in the AoE will be pulled into the center and they will take some ability damage. First of all, invest some points into a dummy ward. This is a ward that can be placed, then immediately sold prior to the spawning of waves. Unless dewarded, this ward will provide you with vision to defend against potential ganks and monitor the first river buff spawn. When you get into lane, start farming minion last hits. If the enemy mid laner pushes the lane towards your tower, that's all the better. Safer farm for you. Start using your Harvest Nettles to poke down the enemy mid laner. Line up your hits with care so you can successfully push them out of lane without losing any mana. Remember that the river buffs spawn at the 3-minute mark, then every 2 minutes thereafter. Don't hesitate to use abilities to quickly burst it down if you are wary of a potential gank, as you will gain mana regen from it anyway. I like to level up Untamed Growth first in order to start pressuring the mid lane, allowing me to rotate for river buffs and to assist allies without having to worry about my tower. I consider post level 5 to be entering the mid game. Keep setting your lane and rotating aggressively to assist allies. The highest damage you can deal with comboing your abilities is by using Untamed Growth, then Fly Trap, Bramble Patch, and Harvest Nettles. This ensures that enemies take the final blast of Untamed Growth. However, I find that most enemies start moving away as soon as you use Untamed Growth, so I will almost always use Fly Trap, then Untamed Growth, Bramble Patch, Harvest Nettles. Never underestimate your Titty Sprinkles. It has a 2,000 unit range and pretty significant damage. When using your ultimate, try to wait for enemies to use any kind of cleansing or immunity effects prior to casting. You can cancel the effects of Fly Trap with certain abilities. However, attempting to move out of Fly Trap is fruitless unless they can move out of line of sight, such as dropping over a ledge or moving behind a wall. Although you are the mid laner, it is everyone's responsibility to defend all of the lanes. You are the caster. As such, you have the best wave clear on the team. Use it to assist your allies in winning the fight. I find that a single Untamed Growth is enough to either set a lane for a massive push, or to freeze it long enough to allow you to rotate towards other threats. Late game for the Fey is much like mid game. Keep pushing and holding lanes while assisting your team. One difference is that you need to start looking for opportunities to catch multiple enemies in your ultimate. 1 or 2 people is fine for early and mid game, but you really want to attempt to set up a potential game-ending wipe in the later stages. Now that you've come this far, I will reveal to you my super secret Fey escape technique. I call it the Top Gun for reasons that will soon be apparent. This only works on melee heroes, but it works well. When being chased, instead of trying to turn around and slow an enemy with Bramble Patch, wait until they engage, then cast brambles in the direction you're currently traveling. Immediately turn and head the opposite direction. You put on the brakes and they fly right by straight into your slow. By the time they get turned around, you'll be long gone. As you can see here, I'm just outside of Chimera's ambush range, which has to be frustrating for him. My team ends up picking him off. This concludes the gameplay portion of the guide. Now let's get to the builds. We'll cover two builds for the Fae. The first will be a build using a large selection of cards. The second will be a build for when you're first starting out in Paragon. This is the build I used during the gameplay. Let's cover the first build. The build is designed to give you flexibility to adapt to the game state. I use a Mage's Ward with a power and 2 minor power. I build this early and maintain it through the late game. The next card I will always use is Teleblink for escapes and ultimate setups. Next comes a Thorned Greenweave with 4 upgrades, 2 major powers and 2 greater barriers. This allows me to either build more armor or power depending on the situation. I also have a Spiked Bone Plate with a similar setup except I use guards instead of barriers. I use a Magna Lens with an advanced chrono and 2 major shocks. The Fae gains more from ability pin than most heroes. I don't know why, but she does. The chrono is just there to keep me in the fight. Finally, I use a Hunter's Guile with 2 major powers and a power. Cards I don't use but could possibly be very helpful in your own build include Stasis Gem for avoiding ultimates, Hydroverser for an extra bump of power at high mana, Tainted Magic for some extra oomph on your early game poke, Ash of the Witch to add a little extra CC with your low cooldown Titty Sprinkles ability. Now the build for beginners. I use the 6 cards at 10 CP apiece for this deck to avoid confusion. This build is designed to provide you with enough health to withstand some damage while setting up kills for your team. I use a Lord's Ward with a major health and 2 health, a Staff of Adamant with a major power and 2 powers, a Fountain Spike with a major power and 2 power, an Elder Mage Amulet with a major power, a power, and a health, a second Elder Mage Amulet with a major power, a power, and a health, and a Solaris Reactor with a major power and 2 powers. Please bear in mind that while these builds work well for me, they may not suit your playstyle. Experiment around to find the right build for you. I didn't include the early game build order because that will always be fluid, and I don't want to lead anyone down the path of thinking about builds as being rigid and inflexible. There are many different builds and guides out there for all the heroes in Paragon. I suggest you don't use just one for your information, but instead seek out a variety in order to come up with the best possible build and playstyle to fit your gameplay. I may touch on some things that others have not, while a different content creator may address something that I left out. Another YouTuber that I recently discovered that produces well thought out content is EpicMedz. I'll leave a link to his channel in the video description below. This concludes my mid-lane Fae build and guide. Please do me a favor and hit that like button if this was helpful. Subscribe and be sure to check out my daily casting call series, which is less informative yet far more entertaining. For now, this is Mongoose signing off. You guys have a good one.